has in New York. He's not paying his taxes that he has on his offshore properties. And if he writes the code and he runs afoul, I think that speaks well of how complicated the code is. And right now, the individual that's in charge of the IRS doesn't even do his own taxes. So where does that leave you and I? We're there plugging into our TurboTax, trying to do the best job we can to make sure that we don't run afoul of the federal government. So I would love to see some type of repeal. I definitely support the fair tax, flat tax, and the VAT. How are they going to work that? Are they going to bring it in as taking over the other two, or are they going to bring it in as an additional tax? If they're bringing it in as additional tax, that's a big thumbs down. You won't have to guess too far on that one. But the beauty of the flat tax, it's been scored by the Congressional Budget Office. And I think that's the easiest one that we're going to be able to get through immediately. And then I'd like to work towards bringing the fair tax in and then repealing the 16th Amendment. But our current tax code, it's all about power. And what government does is they're penalizing one individual and giving a gift over here to another. They're special interest groups with our tax code. So if we could get to a fair tax or a flat tax, that takes away so much power from our federal government. And then it makes the system is much clearer. We know what we're going to pay. It's easier to understand. But more importantly, we're reducing the power of government and also their interference in our lives so that we can engage towards productive activity. And right now our code is too punitive for that.
Thank you. Ms. Olson.
Well, obviously we need some form of taxation because there are things that the federal government has to do, and we're all aware of that. However, we all agree that our spending has gotten out of control and that we are taxed too much. So we need to, first of all, really pass a balanced budget amendment, get our budget under control. The three taxes that you want to talk about, I'm going to talk about the worst one first, which is the VAT tax, or the value-added tax. I do understand that that is on Mr. Obama's agenda because he's running out of money, and so he's got to find some way to fund it. And the value-added tax, and that is a tax that is added at the point of sale everywhere along the chain, from the cotton in the field all the way to the jacket that you're wearing. It's a horrible bill, and it's one that we need to fight. The fair tax I'm concerned about for the consumers because, and I know that there's some people that are very passionate about the fair tax, but from what I've seen, I'm very concerned that the amount that you would actually pay is really unknown. The percentage that you would pay is really unknown. It fluctuates, and I have seen some things that it is as high as 50%. And so this is a difficult thing to control. The flat tax at 17% is a more fair tax, I think, that would allow you to do one form, pay 17%, and send it in. And another thing that Newt Gingrich suggested, and I think this is a good thing, and something to consider, is what's called the flat tax-free choice. And that is that you would choose whether you want to take the deductions because of the commitments that you have made at this time, and any year that you want to, you could change over to the flat tax. And that may be something to be helpful.
Thank you. Our next question, and Mr. Scholl will be the first to answer this. We go back to the subject of immigration, but this time, what is your position regarding illegal immigrants who are currently in this country? Mr. Scholl.
With regard to the illegal immigrants that are currently in the country, they're lawbreakers. And I don't understand why people say, well, there's so many here, you can't get rid of them. How are you going to do that? I fly for Delta Airlines. Every time I go down to South America or Mexico, we usually have an individual on board that we're deporting. So why can't we just do that on a continuing basis? They escort them to the jetway, the individual gets on board, we close the door, the Customs and Border Patrol leaves the gate. We get down there to Mexico, there's a Delta agent there to meet that individual, and they get off the airplane. That's a cheap ticket. Government pays for it, Delta's happy, they get money out of it, and the individual's back in his own country. It sets the tone. It says that we are not going to allow amnesty for lawbreakers. When's the last time you got a break on breaking the law? When's the last time you got a break on breaking the tax code? Try doing that one here in your own country, and you're a United States citizen. So all their stories and all their fallacies, well, you know, they're here. We're going to have to deal with that. No, we're not. They're lawbreakers. Send them home. And like I said earlier, secure that fence, because that fence right there sends a signal that our borders are sacred. And we've got to secure those things, because that's where the terrorists are starting to come through. That's why we landed that flight in Newfoundland, because the individual that was heading to Mexico City was on the no-fly list. And they got him off. They caught him before he got into Mexico and was able to come across. But my brother-in-law is a Fairfax County police officer up in Virginia. The Mexican and the Guatemalan gangs, they're a problem. And those individuals are not coming here legally. And they're causing additional burden on our schools, our healthcare system, and on all the services that you provide here, the county commissioners and them have to pay for. So send them back. If I got into Moscow, when I fly into Moscow, I can only stay as long as they've allowed me, and then I've got to get out of town. Do the same thing with the people that come here, respect our borders.
Thank you, Ms. Alston.
Well, I think there's some things that we could do immediately that would be very helpful. Number one, we should deport aliens who are convicted of felons. We currently have 500,000 illegal immigrants in prison because of felons. Those would be very easy, and that's at a cost of about $30,000 a year. We need to take the expense ourselves if we have to fly those people home. It would certainly be a lot cheaper. We need to cut off federal funding for sanctuary cities that prohibit police, that's hard to say for some reason, from checking immigration status. We can do that immediately. We need to make English the official language. We can do that immediately. We need to have monetary fines against people who hire employees without checking illegal immigration status. We can do that immediately. We need to outsource probably the tamper-proof ID cards, and that's something that could be done immediately. Without those things in place, it would be inconvenient for people to stay here, and they would have to go home. And then we've got to revise our visa program to say, we'll make it easier for you to get a visa, but you have to have a job here first. You can't come over here and find a job. You've got to get in line with everyone else. Those things could be done immediately, and I think we would see a lot of the problem go away.
Thank you. And Mr. Sutherland.
As I stated a few moments ago, we are a nation of laws. And so therefore, as long as those laws are being violated and there is no enforcement of those laws, then that creates an environment of chaos. And so therefore, we have got, that's where I really disagree with the action of President Reagan, and I agree with a lot that he did. But I disagree with amnesty. I think that if you come into this country illegally, and this country grants you citizenship, then that is an unfair penalization to all of those that came into this country legally. And I know many of you, your families, our families, all migrated to this country wanting a better future for their families. I believe that the federal government, because they are responsible for immigration and allowing people to come into this country and make a new life for themselves and their families, that same government that proves incompetent on just about every front is the same government that is incompetent regarding immigration. So it shouldn't take 10 years, it shouldn't take $20,000 for someone who loves their family and wants to provide a great future for them. In that incompetence that is inside of the federal government, in that, and make it legal and a more speedy process. And I'm sure that many of those that are here illegally will go through the process. And part of being assimilated into our nation is adopting English as the language. They will be assimilated into what it means to be an American. You see, America is not just a place, it's a mindset. It's an understanding that we represent something that no other place in the world represents. And until you can be assimilated into the American culture and understand what freedom, but also understand what liberty means, you can't be here.
Thank you. We move on to our next question, and Ms. Olshner will be speaking first. As legislators, you would be in the position to put pork into legislation that does not necessarily pertain